Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, it's time to do a little bit of maintenance on my splitter here. This is a model from Weaver. It's their Economy. I think it's called Economy Heritage Splitter. I've had it for quite a few years, and I think it's been about a year since I had the blade off and honed it. And it's getting quite challenging to pull through here, so it's time to do a little sharpening on here. Let me get you up close and show you, and then hopefully we get a good before and after comparison. Just a scrap of leather here. It's probably hard to tell, but you can see the leather narrow down here because I'm pulling pretty hard on it. Yeah, I wasn't taking a whole lot off there, but it's pretty dull. So let me go ahead, we'll take this blade off of here, and then we'll get sharpening on that. I appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop today. So to remove the blade, I'll just use this Allen wrench here. And you could probably try to mark where it's at, but to me it takes, there's no exact science to setting this other than a little bit of trial and error of lining up. You want to be right about the center point of this roller. I'm sure I could measure, use some kind of a gauge here, but I think I would still have to fine tune it at the end. As you can see, it's a very stout blade on there, and it's still pretty sharp. I guess I could have tried to futz a little bit with the positioning of it, because that does make a big difference on how well it cuts. But it's been, I think, at least a year since I sharpened this last. So let's get over here on the workbench and we'll give this a sharpening. I think I've mentioned this before. You can go out and you can spend a lot of money on diamond honing stones, and they're awesome. They totally are. But if you don't have a lot of, especially big blades to sharpen, then that may not be the best for you. And if you want to get started without spending as much money, you can do quite a bit with some of this wet and dry sandpaper. I use this 3M wet and dry sandpaper. And I'll put a little bit of oil on here, but I'm going to tape it down first. The biggest thing you want to do is you want to get the blade. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this bevel. It's got a huge bevel here. I'm going to set that on there and get it pretty much flat to it. Well, not pretty much. I'm trying to get it flat to it. And we're just going to make some circular motions here, keeping this blade in contact with the sandpaper here. And I'm just going to go ahead and do this for, I don't know, a couple of minutes. So I'll fade back here in just a moment. And I'm just looking to see if I've got, pretty much all polished here along this front edge. There's a lot of circular grinding marks on here from where this blade was originally milled. And there were a lot when I first started, when it was new. And I've worn through most of those flattening this out on this flat countertop. One of the hardest things, I think, is making sure you have a flat surface to work on. And I've used glass before, a piece of like 3/16 or 1/4 inch tempered glass works really pretty well. Nice flat surface to hone off of. And I will do almost all of my honing on this this beveled edge, not on the back, because I want that to remain flat to the roller that it cuts as a guide on the back. Once I have several minutes here on 400 grit, then I will move up to 600 grit next, and I'm going to work my way through until I've done the 2000 grit. And then I will take a few swipes on leather with polishing rouge to make sure that it's well polished at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and work through these other grits, and I will be back here in just a few minutes. Probably hard to tell, but I can see that it's shinier yet. All of those scratches from the earlier sandings of coarser sandpaper are being worn away and being replaced, believe it or not, with more scratches, but they're a finer scratch. Even the finest sandpaper, the finest stone, they will all create scratches. They'll just be smaller and finer with each step. And when I use the polishing rouge, this was the 1500 grit sandpaper. The polishing rouge, I believe, is something like 20,000 grit is where it's at. The oil is really just to clear away the metal filings that come off of this. The oil itself is getting gray as I do this, and that's the metal that's being removed from the blade. It's getting floated away in that oil off of this grit. If you did it without the oil, and you could, if you did it without the oil, the sandpaper will start to load up with metal filings and become less active. And also, when you first start, it would be harder to slide it on here because of not having the lubrication there. You know, maybe one day I'll spend the money to buy large, because it would take a pretty good size diamond stone to do this. And I could use an Arkansas stone, but if you use it for other sharpening, my experience is that unless you flatten the stone and true it on a regular basis, is it gets some shape in it from sharpening knives and other things on there. And the result is you don't have the flat surface any longer to sharpen off of, and it's not going to be as true as being flat like this countertop is. And in case there's any wire edge on here, I'm just going to flip this over and just work it flat on this surface. Okay. Now the last thing I'll do, I don't know that it needs it on this blade. This blade's got, it's not as sharp of an angle. A lot of times you'll have even a more acute, a finer point that's fragile. And a lot of times on those, they'll put what they call a micro bevel on it. And I'm just going to raise it up here just ever so slightly and just pull backwards. And I'll do this a dozen times or so, trying to mimic the same each time. And that puts a little micro bevel on there. You can spend as much money on sharpening devices and apparatuses and stones and oils as you spend on the equipment itself. But what I do works good for me, so I'm going to keep doing it. It's got a nice shine to it. I got one more step to go here. I had created a stropping board with leather attached to some plywood, and I had two of them, so I'd have one in my other shop. And I guess I took both of them. I took the other one to the other shop, and then I left them both there. So I'll go back to without my board here. Kind of a disadvantage there. So you'll see this white rouge will turn gray because I'm polishing metal off of this surface. I'd rather have two hands on this, but I need one to hold the leather. That's why that stropping board really was pretty handy. Well, I guess it'll maybe stay a little bit in place. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the rouge is turning gray because we're picking up the metal off of here that we're removing with that fine grit. When I'm done here, all those fine scratches from the, well, most of those fine scratches from the 2000 grit sandpaper that I used last should be removed. And Weaver does offer a sharpening service where you can take this blade off and send it to them, and they will sharpen it. Yeah, I think it's pretty well polished. I'm going to tip it up just a little bit, polish that wire edge, and then I'm going to go ahead and just drag it here to make sure that there's not a lot of times the metal will actually deform on that edge and create kind of an odd wire on the edge there, and by removing it or stropping it on this back side, it should remove that. All right. Yep, it's reflective. Let's go ahead and install this now. All righty. Now you can put a gauge between, say, this shoulder and the blade, and obviously it would take a lot of sharpening to change that, and maybe I should do that, but what I've done in the past is I just line up visually over the center of this roller. If you get forward of the center, what ends up happening is the leather, as you're pulling it, is pushing up against the bottom of this blade. Makes it extremely difficult to pull. And so you're better to be, I think, like a couple thousandths back from center on here. You can always scoot it forward if it's not cutting right. I guess you can always pull it back as well. It'd be a miracle if it's set right this first time, but let's see what we've got here. Well, that's remarkably better. It's probably hard to tell, but you can see the leather narrow down here because I'm pulling pretty hard on it. The next thing you have to do is, for what I do, splitting belts, it's not as important, but if this blade is pushed forward more on one side than the other, then it will cut a different depth than one side to the next. But man, it's remarkably sharper than it was. I guess I could buy some kind of gauge to put on here so you know how much effort I'm using to pull the leather. I just brought up a little bit here to cut a little bit more off this piece. Yep. Let's see if this cuts some off, then it tells me it's in a different spot than the other side. Yep. That is sharp. I don't think there's enough difference between those two sides that I'm going to worry about it. Wow. Yep, makes a big difference. I've got a piece of leather over here I need to split, and that's the reason why I started down this path. I'm going to take this strap here, and we're going to thin down this last 5 inches or so. Let's go a little bit more. The one thing I don't like about this, I mean, I'm able to dial it in fairly quickly where I want it, but it'd be nice if there was some easy way to set this so you knew exactly what you were removing. There we go. Well, there you go. An easy solution to maintenance on this. Is that the way you'd do it if you had a fancy shop with all endless supplies? Absolutely not. You'd have a couple $100 diamond sharpening stone that you were using. But I used 5 sheets of sandpaper. I think they're 80 cents a piece, so $4, but I'll use that sandpaper for probably the next couple of months sharpening my other smaller hand tools. So anyway, $4 a year to sharpen and keep that in good shape. I think it's well worth the investment. I like this splitter. It does a great job for me. I just wanted to share that experience with you today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope you have a great day.